put together really quick on the fly. We're live.
Yeah, it's we do our best. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the early risers, to the early joiners.
It's Wednesday, and we don't have as many things to talk about, but we do have a lot of interesting videos to share with people that I think are some of them pretty interesting and humorous, and then also a lot of them get straight to the point with the coronavirus and are schools ever going to open up again, and if they do, what is that going to look like? I think that's really interesting to highlight how other countries are already doing so, and maybe how some families are responding to what's happening in other countries like China and Canada that we're seeing. And then also, you shared a video of Rand Paul with me, which will be interesting to look at.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah, but I think we're good for a clean in. We already have a good amount of people hopped on. So just actually as a reminder real quick for everyone, make sure you're commenting and sharing your thoughts so that we can share them below and answer and respond to them directly. And if you think, some of the stuff in the news is crazy, go ahead and talk about it and we'll feature it down here if you want to be part of the show. So that's just a quick reminder. And yeah, Bob, I should go this way. Bob, take us away.
Welcome to Random Assignment, everybody. I'm Bob Bowden with Choice Media, brought to you by the Choice Media smartphone app. And joining me, of course, is the juggernaut, as I call him, the great Corey DeAngelis from the Reason Foundation. And Corey, it's I always hated the word hump day or the phrase or whatever. I always felt it was like kind of vaguely coarse or something. But there is, people can think we are past the midpoint of the week if presuming people are working and not just, far too many people unemployed right now. But anyway, so
I feel
post midweek.
I feel like the whole week is just work week. I mean, you get to the weekend and I can't even go out to a nice restaurant or anything, and I can go out for a run and stuff, but I could do that during the week, the work week as well. So it seems like the whole week is just work week at this point, and maybe that's just maybe that's just a reminder that I should stop working so much, but.
Well, don't do that.
Hump day.
Don't do that.
Wednesday.
The children of America are banking on you, Corey. But I would just say that, it's interesting to think almost whatever you like out there, gentle listener, gentle viewer. You got going to sports games, college sports, professional sports, not happening. You like going to music concerts? No. Movies? Can't go. Go out to restaurants? No. It's almost like, apart from taking a run, you make a good point. Almost every form of entertainment, I guess, sitting at home and watching, Amazon Prime or Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix. And I've run out of all the Netflix stuff, so now I just subscribe to the Amazon Prime, and I started watching Man in the High Castle.
I watched a couple seasons of that before I lost it, and then I'm also. By the way, is my mic okay? My level okay? I'm not distorting. I think
I can hear you, and you're not hurting my ears or anything. Okay. So that's good.
I just started a very old series, but it was new to me, which is the one called. I think it's called American Horror Story. Do you know that one?
Yeah, I think there's like several seasons, and they're all pretty different, but the same kind of theme, and they use the same actors. So I really like that one as well.
All right, so let's get to it, everybody. We had a Senate hearing on, we sometimes work in coronavirus. It's kind of what everybody's talking about a little on this program, but in particular, on Monday, the day before yesterday, as we taped this on Wednesday, May 13th, on May 11th, Senator Rand Paul was questioning Dr. Anthony Fauci in the U.S. Senate about not just the coronavirus response, but specifically with respect to schools and when schools should reopen. And some of his comments were so on point, I really wanted to show you guys those comments here. So here we go.
With regard to going back to school, one thing that was left out of that discussion is mortality. I mean, shouldn't we at least be discussing what the mortality of children is? This is for Dr. Fauci as well. The mortality between 0 and 18 in the New York data approaches 0. It's not going to be absolutely 0, but it almost approaches 0. Between 18 and 45, the mortality in New York was 10 out of 100,000. So really, we do need to be thinking about that. We need to observe with an open mind what went on in Sweden, where the kids kept going to school. The mortality per capita in Sweden is actually less than France, less than Italy, less than Spain, less than Belgium, less than the Netherlands, about the same as Switzerland. But basically, I don't think there's anybody arguing that what happened in Sweden is an unacceptable result. I think people are intrigued by it, and we should be. I don't think any of us are certain when we do all these modelings. There have been more people wrong with modeling than right.
Part two?
That's part one, yes. And so he goes on, actually, well, yeah, go ahead. Let's play part two.
In rural states, we never really reached any sort of pandemic levels in Kentucky and other states. We have less deaths in Kentucky than we have in an average flu season. It's not to say this isn't deadly, but really outside of New England, we've had a relatively benign course for this virus nationwide. And I think the one-size-fits-all that we're going to have a national strategy and nobody's going to go to school is kind of ridiculous. We really ought to be doing it school district by school district, and the power needs to be dispersed because people make wrong predictions. And really the history of this, when we look back, will be of wrong prediction after wrong prediction after wrong prediction. But if we keep kids out of school for another year, what's going to happen is the poor and underprivileged kids who don't have a parent that's able to teach them at home are not going to learn for a full year. And I think we ought to look at the Swedish model, and we ought to look at letting our kids get back to school. I think it's a huge mistake if we don't open the schools in the fall.
So several of these comments had me leaping out of my chair, Corey. I got to tell you.
This is what you've been saying.
Thank you.
You've been saying on this podcast for the past couple of weeks. I think you had him. Maybe he was listening to us. He heard you talking about local control.
Yeah, I met him. I actually I asked him questions for about an hour in front of a closed dinner party of like 60 people one time about 5 years ago. So I do know him. I'm sure he's watching every episode of Random Assignment.
Of course.
Yeah, it had me leaping out of my chair. One is when he says the part about how this ought to be district by district. And you look at a place like Kentucky, and fewer people have died from coronavirus there than an average flu season pass away from the regular influenza. And he says, this is not to say it's not dangerous, but to treat it as one size fits all, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. It is insane to me to pretend that the policies about even just within a state, from New York City, like I said, I think last week, that New York City should be the same as Oswego, New York, which is hours and hours away, on the lake. Is crazy. So and then he moves on, to a bunch of other points, about how something else. I'm sorry. Go ahead and respond. I forgot my second.
Yeah,
point.
I mean, this is exactly what you've been saying all along, that it should be up to the localities to determine if they should be able to open their schools back up. And, so local control could be the best way to do it. And that's essentially what Rand Paul is arguing for. And I also saw a related article that just came out today from the Washington Examiner. Brad Palumbo actually commented on this, and he said, look, there's a bunch of critics freaking out over Rand Paul's reasonable call to reopen schools. So Washington Examiner is calling it reasonable, at least Brad Palumbo is. And I guess he goes over some people's backlash to this. Sounds like a pretty reasonable idea to me as well. I have a little bit of mixed feelings about this, about reopening schools. Obviously, on the one hand, again, local control is a good way to do things and to allow localities to reopen schools. But then also, I think homeschooling is a really good idea. But the thing is, like we talked about last week, if schools reopen, that doesn't mean that homeschool families need to send their kids back to the brick and mortar school. So I think it's I think it's a good idea to.
So here's the second point that escaped my mind a second ago, is when Rand Paul went on to say, some of the lowest income kids are the ones whose maybe single parents are not at home during the day, and those are the kids who most need to have traditional schools perhaps reopened. And so there could be, the left loves to, skew arguments with an economic lens sometimes, saying that there is, when underserved communities are hit harder by something, that's more of a reason to, respond. And so this is a perfect example where I think Rand Paul seems to be using that logic. Hoist them on their own petard. You could say that sounds too cynical for what it really is. I think it really is actually a legitimate point. That is that who's going to probably do the most homeschooling? Probably more economically secure families.
Another issue here is that, we're all paying for this service, but, a lot of places aren't really providing meaningful online education, if they're providing online education at all during this time. So like, where's all the money going, I think is another issue to look at. And, like I always say, the easy way to fix all of this is to just put the money into the hands of the rightful owners, the families. Yeah. And if the schools don't open, well, then who cares if the schools don't open, right? You can send your kid to some micro school environment, or you can send them, to a private school that does provide good virtual education. I think that would solve all these issues. And the only reason it's such a big, thing that has people arguing back and forth about is because, there is no clear answer, but then also the money's just sitting in the government schools, whether they're providing services right now or not, which is completely backwards. With if a grocery store is closed down near me, I can just shop at another grocery store, for example. That grocery store doesn't get to keep all of my money, regardless of where I'm shopping, or regardless if they want to open up again or not in the future. So education savings accounts, I always have to plug that in there, would fix a lot of these issues. But I think another thing that people are kind of...
Corey, if you just call it UBI for education, suddenly I think it'll be, we can't say no to that. That's a leftist idea.
Well, yeah,
as I love to point out.
Universal basic education income, just throw an E in on that idea. Yeah. And, Andrew Yang should be all over that. He should be coming out pretty forcefully in favor of education savings accounts, which is essentially universal basic education income. But another, wrench into this whole discussion is, what is education or schooling going to look like after schools reopen? I think there's a lot of pushback from people that are seeing other countries implementing pretty weird rules in order to minimize any socialization whatsoever in schools when they're reopening. So I would like to share some of those videos from a couple of different countries that people have kind of responded to. Maybe you can respond to them as well, Bob.
Okay.
So here's one from China. This was the first one I saw. But China's already opening up some of the schools, and the China Daily News shared this, maybe a week ago. What do you think?
I'm a tad older than you, Corey. I remember there's a band called Devo where they all looked exactly the same in these photos. They wore like these same helmet kind of things or whatever. And there's old photos of the 1984 George Orwell like movie where it's like these rows of identical people all dressed exactly the same. For those who think of China as like a factory forcing uniformity, a country where original ideas and voices are crushed, beyond recognition for their temerity to speak out. It does sort of convey all those ideas of, replication and, replicants, really. Yeah. So, please, do I really care if kids wear little visors? No, I really don't care. If that's good.
It looks kind of funny, at least. And they had some, they had some nice music going along with the video, so everybody must be happy, right? But that one, having everybody out on the football field or whatever that was, a soccer field, seemed kind of strange to me. Schools look like that already, where everybody's kind of in a line and everybody's kind of in a uniform situation. Not all schools are like that. Obviously, there are different structures of schools, but for the most part, the factory model of schooling in the U.S. and elsewhere kind of looks like that, where everybody's just kind of following orders and sitting in line and listening to what they're being told. But I think another video got some more pushback was from Canada, actually. It took some digging to figure out where this video came from. And there were so many people, almost everyone that was responding to me on Twitter and other forms of social media, they were saying, nice joke, Corey. I mean, this is a parody, right? They just made this video to make fun of the social, the social distancing stuff. So I don't think you've seen this one yet. So I want to share this one with you and get your reactions. Again, this is from a school in Canada, an elementary school, and this is their kind of informational video, and it's not fake, it's real, about how how school is going to look like when they open up again.
Hi Eardley, it's Miss Halpin. Get ready, we are going to take you through what a typical day will look like if you return back to school during COVID-19. Hi kids, don't be alarmed. This is what we're going to look like when you return back. We have goggles, masks, and gloves. Thanks for staying in your car. Hi Ben, how are you? Good. Make sure we stay 6 feet apart, okay? Ready? You're going to stay there and I'm going to go and open the door, okay? Okay, welcome to school. Don't forget, you have to sanitize your hands before you come into the building. Okay, now a staff member will escort Ben to class. We have some funky designs on the floor. You'll notice lines and you'll notice some arrows. Make sure that you are keeping at least one arrow apart from all of your classmates and your teachers. But don't forget, we're going to teach you all of this when you return back to school. Hi, welcome to a typical classroom. Don't worry, you all have your own spot and all of your own materials that are going to be prepared for when you come back. And also, they're 6 feet apart from your classmates. But don't worry, it's big enough for you to get up and do a jumping jack. Some doors are going to have this sign on it. That's an absolute do not enter. Gym, library, NPR, cafeteria, all are closed. All of our play structures and our swings will have caution tape on it, so that's a no-go zone. That's our video to prepare you to come back to school. Don't forget to talk about it with your parents, but don't worry, we'll all be here to help. Can't wait to see ya!
First of all, I spilled my water. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if it's going to be like on a blooper reel or something for somebody, but I was going to,
hey, you could do jumping jacks. They had nice music too.
Yeah, I mean, I almost want to take that video to some sort of super crowded inner city school and play that. So these schools where thousands of kids show up like in a 5-minute period. It was like this one little kid shows up and the one adult is able to just like talk to that one child and open the door for that one child. Yeah, try that at a school with, 700 people showing up over a 4-minute period or something. So I think they would laugh, in other words, at that. But I don't know. What did you think?
Well, I mean, it seems like, a lot of the homeschool families and other families who were sending their kids to, traditional schools are saying, well, if this is what school is going to look like, I'm not going to send them back because, you essentially one of the main arguments for schooling in general is, socialization arguments. And this essentially gets rid of all of that. I mean, the desks are super far apart, no room for socialization, essentially. And everything that makes school fun, all the recess equipment is closed off. It's a no-go zone. Yeah. You can't eat in the cafeteria. You have to eat in the classrooms where, again, you're sitting super far away from each other.
Right.
Everybody's wearing face masks. By the way, how are the students, with hearing impairments going to hear the teachers with face masks in them? I think China was doing a little better with those clear visors because then you could actually read the lips of the teachers. But yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of pushback on social media, and I think it's partially because it's like, well, this doesn't look like any fun. I mean, schools are already areas where, it's a place that you really don't enjoy that much if it's overly structured, and then here you go, it's only amplifying that and reducing all the fun things about school. And so a lot of people were saying, well, if this is what school looks like, I'm not going to send my kids back.
Right. All right, so let's move on. I want to talk about the U.S. Supreme Court. There was a big case in this Catholic schools case, and it has to do with whether Catholic schools can fire people for whatever reasons they want or not. And so, in short, as you see, the AP framed this as the Supreme Court appearing divided over how religious institutions, hospitals, etc., should be shielded from job discrimination lawsuits. So they heard this case. It stemmed from a 2012 Supreme Court decision before, in which the justices said that the Constitution prevents ministers from suing their churches for employment discrimination. But the court didn't rigidly define who counts as a minister. Okay, that was the 2012 case. So there was a lawyer representing 2 Catholic schools sued by former 5th grade teachers who taught religion, among other subjects, and told the justices that the women count as ministers exempt from suing. Quote, if separation of church and state means anything at all, it must mean that government cannot interfere with the church's decision about who is authorized to teach its religion, this lawyer said. But the court struggled with who should count as a minister. It says Justice Sotomayor, for example, told the lawyer that he was seeking an exception that was broader than necessary to protect the church. Justice Kagan asked whether a series of people working for religious institutions would count as a minister, including a math teacher who begins the class with a prayer. That was answered no. Well, what about a nurse who prays with patients? That was answered yes. So they had to get into this fine distinctions about this word minister, based because that's what the previous precedent hung on. And so, like, if you just are a Catholic school and you want to fire a teacher for some sort of moral reason that you feel is not in keeping with your church's teachings, it brings up this issue of when are you allowed to fire them? So before I ran on more, Corey, how would you, if you were a justice or something, how would you rule on a case like this?
Yeah, well, we need to be able to allow private institutions to have their own hiring and firing policies. I don't understand what the main issue about, like the sexuality of the teachers, or
actually no. In this case, it was the 2 specifics were one was a lawsuit about age discrimination, in which a teacher in her 60s was fired. She'd already taught more than 15 years of the school. She was alleging age discrimination, and another case alleged disability discrimination about a teacher who I guess had disclosed she had breast cancer and would need time off. And so the previous precedent was kind of like, no, churches have this 2012 confirmed sort of, they are immune from discrimination lawsuits when they fire people because they have a First Amendment Establishment Clause protection, and therefore they are given immense latitude in things like fire. So they can just fire people that they just want to fire, is what this says. And I can make the other case too, which I'm about to. I don't mean to sound trollish when I put it that way, but that this case says that they should be able to. It was argued that the precedent before called for churches to have wide latitude in who they can fire. Now, I would just quickly add,
what is their argument? Like, is it a First Amendment argument, a religious argument that they should be able to fire based on age? What is the argument?
To be clear, in precedent I've covered in the past, race is a separate matter. That is one that is you must comply with the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You must comply with, because of, as I like to say, America's original sin of slavery. Racial hiring and firing and discrimination issues are handled separately. There's special precedents dealing with race.
Isn't that
but
section
for everything
19?
Else? Pardon?
What's the specific section on that section? I don't remember. I was looking it up really quick.
Okay. For everything else, though, you have varying latitudes depending on whether it's a public institution, private institution, and apparently churches, according to this 2012 case, have their own special provisions. And then it gets into this definition of who's a minister, and like it's almost then becomes this semantical argument of like if this job and role is considered a minister of the faith of that church or religious institution, then the church has virtually completely wide latitude. They can pretty much fire anybody that's considered. I mean, imagine, for example, a church has hired a minister who then changes his mind about his belief in their strictures and starts preaching that the church is wrong. I mean, it seems to me that you could say, like, well, is it his right, First Amendment right but he's doesn't have a First Amendment right to come to that church and get paid to say things against their beliefs. So anyway, in a school context, this applies. So yes, it gets down things like in the specific cases, age discrimination and disability discrimination, and whether, some hardcore libertarians would just say, let anybody hire and fire whoever they want all the time, Corey.
Mm-hmm.
I was half expecting you to say that here.
Well, should I have to hire you, Bob? Like if I'm hiring you to do whatever, like if I'm saying, Bob, I'm going to pay you to do X, Y, or Z, and I don't want to pay you to do that anymore. Why should I not be able to do that for whatever reason? Like, why should I have to continue paying you? That's the libertarian argument, right?
It is a libertarian argument. When
you look at it, like whenever you look at these things from like the individual perspective, it makes a lot of sense. But then like people start getting, weird once it gets to like an institutional thing where it's like a school or a corporation. But I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense that, Bob, if I'm paying you to do something out of my pocket, I shouldn't have to continue paying you out of my pocket to do whatever, type of job that I was hiring you to do, which, by the way, I'm not hiring Bob to do anything for me right now. But if I was,
who knows?
I should be able to say, Bob, you know what, I don't want your services anymore, right? And
right. So
I mean, that's the libertarian argument,
right? And so the point, my point is, once you get into these issues of, well, why did you fire them? Did you fire them for this reason or this reason? Because if what was in your mind, deep in your psychology, was your motivations are complex often. Usually we don't do things for one reason. We have lots of reasons we make decisions, right? Even, the cases of employees I've had. I've fired people before. It's usually not one reason. It's usually like multiple screw ups. In other words, lead to that. So anyway, to get into the psychology of the motivation of the entity person doing the firing, to me is pretty elusive thing, where you then incent them to say a different reason when it really was this reason. Oh, but that reason's been made illegal to fire them. I'm going to say I fire them for this other reason now, because that's the legal reason to fire them. It's like hate speech laws or your hate crime laws, where you're like, oh, if you kill someone just because you don't like them, that's one sentence. But if you kill someone because of some bias against their group, oh, now you got to have a much worse sentence. In my opinion, I don't know if I care if someone's killing me because of my group or killing me because of me. Like, to me, that's enters into the.
I mean, it almost seems like a libel thing where, libel is really hard to prove. So essentially it doesn't really get enforced all that much because, people can always say, well, I didn't know the truth, unless, there's actual proof that, the individual saying the false information already knew that, and then they were trying to harm the other person's character. So maybe it's related to that. I don't know.
What people will say, Corey, is that you and me, we have no standing to discuss this. We are both straight white males, full exuding privilege wherever we go, privilege. And that, so, these issues are beyond our ability to comprehend. I would just say, again, I could be, though, I could be robbed or stabbed or killed or something. And let the record show if I'm, murdered at some point, I will not care what was in the psychology of the murderer. It seems to me, even with privilege, bad things can happen to you. And I'm just telling you, anyway, so that's my point of view on that. But all right, so go ahead. Your turn.
Yeah. So, getting into, this is kind of related to what we were talking about earlier with the, schools reopening and stuff. But, there's been a lot of people talking about how the government schools in particular have been doing a really bad job with virtual learning. And this is kind of similar to the homeschool debate, where a lot of the homeschool families who were already homeschooling before COVID-19 were essentially saying that, you shouldn't really be calling this homeschooling. This is crisis homeschooling, and you're going to give homeschooling a bad name. Similarly, we're seeing people from, online virtual schools saying, what you guys are doing is not real virtual education like we've been doing all along. We have our stuff together. You shouldn't, be taking our name either. So I've seen like virtual charter schools making this argument as well. Like, don't get us confused with what's going on right now, because we're actually providing a really good service still. And, just because you guys can't get it figured out.
Loaded, Corey?
Yeah. I was about to pull it up really quick.
So going through the Choice Media Newswire on a daily basis, you know, we have this new genre of stories, just like that one. Look at that right there. Mainstream media, Fox 5 News from Baltimore. Parents frustrated with distance learning shortfalls. Oh, wow. It's not just how that district is doing it. It's the concept of distance learning that they're frustrated with, I guess, right? Let's go to the next one. I guess we have one from Kansas City. I mean, this is, oh, look, Kansas City area kids, they're
not going
online class. Just, oh my God, they're just not even doing it. By the way, just to troll quickly here. Oh, surprise, surprise. You agree to give everybody an A for the semester. And oh, look, some of them don't even bother to show up to the online class. How could that have happened?
Yeah, why wouldn't a kid go to class, you know, knowing that they were going to get an A whether they go or not? That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Yeah, the experts told us this everyone gets an A concept would be great. Look at this one. Yeah, teachers grappling with how to keep track of the students. Why? Because, well, look, the state isn't requiring teachers to take attendance, but encourage. If you want to take attendance, teachers, please do it. One, I guess, from Houston saying
subscribe.
Something else, subscribe. Yeah. Look, losing contact with schools during pandemic shutdown, right? Because online learning is just, everybody's shut down with the brick and mortar. Why bother with the online? I guess there's one with Vermont. Oh, no, here. Some New Hampshire schools are throwing in the remote learning towel. Will Vermont follow? Okay. So
it's never ending. There's so many of these stories.
On and on, these stories about the failure of online learning. I mean, imagine you're somebody who spent the last 10, 20 years working at a Connections Academy or a K-12 or a Florida virtual school, and you're getting better and better and better at this paradigm called online learning. Your teachers are learning how to craft lessons, deliver them in an online way to encourage engagement, and they're getting great at it. And what happens now? In fact, you know, when we first heard about COVID-19 school shutdowns, we thought, oh, well, this is terrible that there's a virus, but a silver lining might be that a lot of parents will learn about the potential for self-pacing and online learning and that kind of thing. It'll be a big boost to online learning. Here we have the empire striking back with a new swath of news stories saying, oh, online learning sucks. Wow. Like, look at all this terrible online learning. We got to get rid of that. And so I kind of started on this jag when I came across a tweet. A couple of our friends, Jeff Kwiatkowski from K-12 tweeted, and then Tilly Elvram came up and followed up with that. If we have that tweet, I just wanted to show that. Yeah, there you see. First, it was Jeff writing below. Call it what you want. Distance education, emergency remote learning. What's happening across most of America is not online schooling. And then Tilly says, nope, not even close to the online education my students receive. There's a lot of room to improve the experience for educators and families. So I just wanted to point this out because this is it's a messaging problem for, I think, a lot of online schools when they're getting bombarded by some of these headlines.
Yeah, that's totally true. And this is really similar to, like I said, the homeschooling discussion where, you know, even myself from the get-go, pretty much, you know, saying things like, you know, we're all essentially homeschoolers now. You got to add the word essentially because this is not what homeschooling is meant to look like. It's crisis homeschooling. And the same thing with the virtual schools. I mean, now we first saw the pushback from the homeschool community. Now we're seeing that same kind of pushback from the virtual providers, the virtual charter schools and otherwise, you know, saying I don't want to be branded along with, you know, the failures of the government school system in not being able to adequately provide, you know, virtual education, you know, during the crisis. And, you know, again, it's not like the fault per se of the government school systems. It could be in some cases where they're just slacking off, but, you know, in other cases, it is a tough thing to do, you know, in a short amount of time when, you know, your bread and butter wasn't virtual education for the longest, you know, period of time. Perhaps the government school system should have implemented some type of technology before, you know, a crisis pushed them to implement technology. But
right, as a couple of dozen states had at least the states, not so much the government schools per se, but states at least called for statewide online learning, with a bunch of other states having no statewide online learning, like where I live, New Jersey, for example. So I mean, I think maybe you're going a little easy on them. I think, again, it is kind of their fault when they roll out things like, hey, LAUSD, teachers union, let's do a deal. We'll agree that nothing that there'll be no expectation. Essentially, there's no, you don't have to do anything pretty much. There'll be no consequences to essentially any poor degree of teaching during this period of time, and all the students get A's. Pretty much all the teachers effectively, in other words, get A's also. You're giving everybody A's, the students, the teachers, everyone just gets an A. That is a mistake. I think you can put that on them. That's actually just dumb policy, as we keep talking about. But so that part's their fault. But your point is that you can't expect them to be good at something that instantly they've never done before. And so,
I mean, it's been some time now, but my larger point is, maybe if we had competition in the education system, they would have already been on board with, adapting to virtual education a long time ago. Maybe it wouldn't have required a crisis to do so. But then also I wanted to point out this recent article in the New York Times, which is kind of a similar idea, because of a lot of government schools, a lot of private schools too, and virtual charter schools. It's not just the government schools, but we've seen evidence in other surveys that the private schools are getting their butts in gear a lot faster than the government-run schools for the most part. But the New York Times just came out recently saying the school year essentially ended in March. I mean, and the argument there is that these kids aren't really getting a good education, since the schools closed. To which I would respond, well, maybe they weren't getting a good education before the schools closed anyway, and maybe maybe a lot of them are actually getting a better education at home with self-directed learning when they're actually directing their own education and seeking the reading materials that they're interested in. Maybe some of them are getting a better education. So I mean, what's really interesting here though is that, throughout the article, I mean, the main claim is that, a lot of kids aren't getting an education right now. And well, what do we have to do? We just have to throw $133 billion more dollars into the system because, of course, if you just throw more money at the problem, it's gonna make it go away. Is essentially the thrust of this article. And what's also interesting here, I contacted them for a correction actually because they had one of the numbers verifiably wrong, in that they argue that, well, schools were closed for about a third of the year. We spend $400 billion on education in 1 year. So if you take a third of that, well, we should just invest $133 billion more dollars in the system. That'll fix everything and make sure we don't lose ground on education. And they correctly point out that $133 billion is about the size of the Marshall Plan, which was, how much the United States put into rebuilding Europe after the devastation of World War II, which is a lot of money. And they admit that. But the problem here is that we don't spend $400 billion in education each year in the US. We spend almost twice that amount. We spend over $700 billion, which would mean that the amount they're calling for is twice the amount of the Marshall Plan. So what's interesting here, again, what's even more interesting, you go to their own source. This is the source I would use, National Center for Education Statistics. Go to the most recent year, you adjust, in constant dollars, total education spending is $739. This is in thousands, $739 billion in total expenditures in 1 year in the United States on public education for the K through 12 years. So I emailed the editor.
Also, 40% of that is in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so the number's completely off, but what that means essentially for their policy implication is that it's double the size of the Marshall Plan, which was meant to rebuild Europe after World War II.
Well, what is the math on that? In other words,
800.
I thought they were just extrapolating. It wasn't the 133 as a percentage of the 400. They were just saying 133 is
a third of
adjusted Marshall Plan. If you just took the Marshall Plan money and just inflation adjusted it, it'd be
no. They took the 400 and they said, well, you know what? This is since we lost about a third of. I got my calculator out. since we lost about a third of the year, well, we spend about 400 billion. They said, well, if you take that and you take a third of that, a third of the year, well, if we just add it back into the system, if we just back it, so 400 divided by 3 is 133.333.
I understand that, but there was it's not like we didn't spend that one. We already spent
it. Yeah, so this is additional funding they're calling for. And if you just, if you divide it by 3, well, that means, in order to prevent learning losses, we just got to add that much.
Wow. So
this is a world-renowned economist.
Corey, could we get kids to learn twice as much if we just doubled education spending everywhere? Would the kids actually learn double their scores on all the tests?
I mean, that's the problem here, right? That's the logic. And that the logic is, in order to prevent learning losses, well, if we just get people to go to school 7 days a week next year, or if we make them go to school all summer, well, then they're just, they're just going to do better. And especially, if we double education spending, well, then, we'll regain all of our losses that we would.
Ironically, as the late Andrew Coulson would tell us, we actually already did double it a couple of times. At least we tripled it, I think, since.
Well, from 1960, we've increased per pupil education expenditures, and this was a correction in the Washington Post that I got done. This is why I know the number off the back of my hand is, since 1960, inflation adjusted per pupil education expenditures in the U.S. have increased by about 230%. So they've nearly quadrupled, or nearly tripled at least, from 1960s. So we've increased spending by a lot.
Over tripling, 200% would be tripling if that's
over tripling. Yeah. So the reality is, you can spend $1 billion per child and get the same outcomes if you're not spending the money wisely. And if you have a monopoly, you have no incentive whatsoever to spend that money wisely. Why would you? Why not spend it on slip and slides and football stadiums, which those are cool things too, but you're not going to really increase test scores that way, or increase academic outcomes at least. And if you can just spend it on administrators and just hiring more people, which lead to more union dues, why would you not do those other things? And why would you spend the money on the classrooms if you don't have the incentive to actually do so?
Okay, so next, I wanted to talk about I don't want to go so hard on the social issues this time. People would laugh. The people that knew me 10 and 20 years ago would laugh that I, seem to be on this. But I just wanted to mention it anyway. I know there's a lot of interest in this issue of transgender athletes. In other words, students who are born male who then participate as girls in high school sports. Connecticut has been the place where this became the biggest issue, and it had gone to court. In fact, Connecticut, it was around a year ago, I think, where some students who, I'll just say, were born male won the state track meet in certain categories. And, so we now had this story cross this week. Attorneys for the high school asked the judge to recuse himself after he forbids them from describing trans athletes as male. So I thought this was interesting. It wasn't the judge's own terminology that is in question. It's the judge ordering the plaintiffs to use the terminology that the judge believes they should be using.
And the plaintiffs are the students, right? The female students who don't want to compete with students who are born as biological males, right? That's
born as boys, exactly, right. So, nevertheless, so now they're saying, look, now you got to recuse it. We're not going to just quietly obey your order to change our own language, which we've spoken all of our lives, and it's not hate. It's simply using a term to mean what I believe the term has always meant. And for that to be suddenly rebranded as some kind of hate speech, we do not accept that. So, and we think that you as a judge, it'd be one thing for you to use your own language to describe however you want to, describe this scenario, but to order us to use your language, they say is grounds for recusal.
Yeah. So when I first looked over this really quickly, I thought it was a case about, allowing or not allowing students who were born as biological males to compete with students who are born as biological females. I thought this was a case about, just the practices of, of the competition and making the competition more, fair in the views of the participants. But it looks like, from what you're saying, is that this looks like a freedom of speech issue, right?
Well, they are adjudicating the issue to which you just referred. That is but this is sort of on this issue of the recusal is on top of that, is kind of to say, we're not going to just quietly obey your language orders, Judge. We are going to complain about this and call it grounds for recusal. So we'll see where it happens. But I just wanted to provide that update to our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, I think Connecticut was, the state, like, within the last couple of years where a student who was born as a biological male but identified as a female won the state, track.
No, I just said that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the same place. I was just thinking about those stories that came up within the last year or two.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother conversation as to whether, what those rules should look like. And again, I don't know the best answer to that. I can obviously see how there could be, there's an obvious benefit if you're born a biological male when competing against
no doubt about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's an obvious, then that's the issue. But then you weigh that with the, the views, and you want to be sensitive to the views of the trans athletes as well. So I mean, I see how that can be a controversial issue. But
I was ready to move on this, but you're triggering me to talk more about it, Corey.
Yeah, I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Some of the conservatives will have branded this as a war between a civil war in the left, that the sort of feminist left is warring with the trans left on this issue, and that some conservatives seem to be kind of delighted at observing that civil war play out. In my opinion, there's aspects of that, as I tweeted this week, that are true, but it's really not the whole truth. I really see this as a question of whether, girls' sports can exist going forward in a way. I mean, there's no, people talk about being science deniers. There's, when it comes to whatever climate or something, there's no doubt that the science says that boys are stronger than girls. I mean, not every boy is stronger than every girl, of course, etc. But, please, it's if you just say that anybody can identify any day as a girl, and then
there was a recent story as well, and maybe you said this too. Sometimes I don't listen to every single thing because I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, but
that's all right.
There was another case, where it was a wrestler. I don't know. It was just like the track meet issue, but a wrestler, and I don't know if it was. I don't remember what they were born as, but I think they might have been taking hormones or something that gave them a leg up as well. Performance enhancing type of. Yeah. And so that, the rules explicitly say you're not supposed to take performance enhancing drugs, but this was
Joe Rogan went pretty deep on this issue once. Of course, he's an UFC MMA commentator, and he got in a lot of trouble or whatever. He talks about it all the time, though. But he was talking about this athlete who was born a male, but was then competing as a female in professional mixed martial arts, didn't disclose that this individual had been born male, was fighting females and destroying the opponents in this regard. And then once it was discovered, Joe Rogan's whole point of view was like, look, if you want to disclose that and the other competitor is okay with that, then go ahead. He's fine. But to sort of do this, and what they'll say is, oh, no, it's okay because this person's been taking estrogen for this amount of time, so that's why they don't need to disclose that they were born male. And Joe Rogan's point is like, you can look at all kinds of anatomical differences that don't instantly change just because a hormone is taken, for no matter how long. Bone density, all kinds of metrics.
Like, I think the big thing in the wrestling was like neck, like diameter or something. Your neck is a lot stronger, which helps in wrestling or something.
Ligaments, there's all kinds of differences like that. So, Anyway, I didn't want to harp on this.
We went off on a tangent. Well, I was interested in what you had to think about that, because it's a complex issue, and I don't know what the right answer is. But
I do. For me, I can't imagine I can't imagine like a father of a girl just saying, okay, go ahead and wrestle the boy who's now identifying, well, pardon my language, but the student who's now identifying as female. I think that
it seems like it's not fair to the biological female students that are working hard and trying. It's hard. It's hard to compete. It seems like it's not fair.
No one is calling for bullying or being insensitive or anything negative to the transgender population. It's nothing to do with that.
It's almost like, and I always try to think about these things through like how it could work differently, in a system of either choice, and that doesn't just mean school choice, but like, like a market for these types of competitions where, maybe one particular, competitive market of wrestling or, high school track or whatever has, people from different, identifications competing with one another, but maybe a different one has different rules, and maybe a different one has different rules about, performance enhancing drugs, and then, just let the market sort it out essentially. And, if I think I think for me, that's the best way to fix the issue, instead of just having a one size fits all top down rule for all competitors.
There you go.
But yeah, let's get to another subject.
Okay. Detroit. Let's go to Michigan.
Boom.
Oh my God, this one wound me up so much, Corey.
Okay, so the Detroit district, I guess this is Detroit Public Schools, allowing some students to take AP exams. And then, there was an email from the head of the teachers union in Detroit telling its members not to go work at the schools, right? Or something like that.
Not to go proctor the exams for these AP exams. And I'm just saying, tell me if I'm crazy. What? Oh, okay. You want to get to that quote? We had a response.
No, it was a different one. Okay. Go ahead and talk. I was popping up this one. Market sorts it out, but
okay, there you go. Why on earth is the teachers union telling members to not volunteer at a school to help proctor exams? Let's scroll down a little. People can actually see the quote here. Why would they be emailing the head of the Detroit Teachers Union, emailing its members to ask them to not volunteer because of coronavirus at this exam proctoring? There you have it. The head of the Detroit Federation of Teachers, Sunday night, urging them not to volunteer to oversee exams. Why? Because this person is an epidemiologist, and this person is such an expert on coronavirus, communicableness or communication, that they like, please don't volunteer at the school. That this person thinks their job as the teachers union is asking teachers to not help students in this school function is insane. To me, that's outrageous. To say, please don't help this district, even if you want to, on a volunteer basis. I guess that's bad for the collective bargaining if people volunteer for free, right? Then it's like, I guess that's the motivation. But obviously, if you care about kids, you don't tell your members to not help kids, because you, as the great preeminent epidemiologist that you are, have discerned the social distances that will be involved in this proctoring of exams and have concluded the viral risk. I mean, what's
the incentive and the logic, going on here with like the teachers unions? I mean, I can see a couple of ways it could be played out. One could be, look, we still get the property tax revenues, we still get the union dues. If we're representing our members, what we want to do is minimize, work and maximize revenues, essentially, right? I mean, that's not a bad. That doesn't mean the teachers unions are evil, right? But
this means they're evil. When you say, please don't help kids,
Well, I mean,
on your own time.
I mean, what I'm saying is their logic is that we're doing everything we can to help our members, and that's it. We're not thinking about the kids. And
it doesn't hurt. No, but we're doing it to help our members do what? The members are choosing to volunteer. That doesn't hurt a member. If there's medical risk, it's up to the member to discern the degree of medical risk that teacher wants to assume. And it's
I'm saying the logic is, from the only thing I can really think of is the logic could be that, well, if you go back to school and you start, working and proctoring exams, well, then society may see precedent. You may it may look, you make the rest of us look bad, and it could be that, and then also, this will pressure us to have to go back to work.
Yes,
we'd rather not.
You know what else? What else makes the rest of us look bad? Somebody else doing a great job, an individual being stellar at their work. That makes the rest of us look bad too. We better tamp that down as well, right? We covered the cartel movie that
that's why we see the
examples of that.
Uniform teaching salaries, no merit pay, no school choice. I mean, this all kind of stems from that.
Giving extra help to a kid who doesn't understand something that every teacher isn't giving makes the rest of us look bad. We better not do that. That's what this is essentially. This proctoring the AP exam is a metaphor for anything that a teacher could do above and beyond, that the union says, please don't do that above and beyond thing. Okay? That it'll help kids or help run the school better. Who cares about that? It's a joke. Why?
Exactly. Yep. And I'm trying to give, I'm over here trying to foil you as much as possible.
You're doing devil's advocacy work. Yes,
I'm trying to be as nice as possible to the unions and their motives, but I mean, it doesn't really look good, and I mean that's the only way I can square it. That it has to do with don't make us look bad, and maybe this will set precedent and it'll make it so that we'll be more likely to go back to work sooner. Why should we have to go back to work if we could just get paid and not have to go back to work?
Right. Yeah.
That's
a lot of times you pay. A lot of times in union negotiations, you pay them off to accept a concession that everyone agrees is rational. So there was one time essentially that happened, and I don't know if you remember when Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook gave Newark Public Schools $100 million, and kind of the word on the street was some of that money went to the Newark Teachers Union to get them to accept this mild merit pay proposal, and you kind of shovel. So he will just pay you off, it's like a payoff, like a mafia payoff. We'll just hand you some money.
Leave us alone. Let us do it.
Can we just do this one logical thing that every corporation in America does? We'll give you money to do this because we got to buy you off to do this one logical thing. Then what happened?
We got to buy you off to give you money.
Yeah, we have to buy you off to get you to go along with basic logic. And then what happened? The next contract came up, and they just dropped the whole merit pay thing. It just disappeared into the ether. Then at the time the next contract came up for negotiation, it's gone. So there's district schools for you. Well, it's an hour, Corey. Look at that.
I know we're talking at the beginning of this and earlier today that we probably weren't going to be able to hit an hour because we didn't have a lot of material. But here we go. We like to talk too much, and there we go. I'm scrolling through some of the comments real quick and, seeing if there's any, maybe last minute.
I want to know if anybody saw me knock my water over. I was getting enthusiastic. I don't know what I was doing. Actually, my hand just went you can kind of see at the bottom of my hand just went like this, and it just went. I had no electronics right there, so I think I'm all right.
Yeah, so it looks like Daniel Early pointed out something I pointed out earlier, that the judge could be violating a First Amendment. Right. I mean, it seems like it's, it seemed from what you were saying that they were essentially controlling the speech of these individuals. I don't see many. There's a lot of comments, but I don't see a lot of explicit questions for us.
Okay. All right.
The market sorts itself out.
I had Mexican food delivered
there we
last
go.
night.
Yep.
So
cool.
You had food delivered at all, Corey?
That's like my fun now, right? I mean, instead of going out to a restaurant on the weekend, I'll order something from a restaurant that I like. It's not as fun, obviously, because you don't get the atmosphere, you know.
Ambiance.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it doesn't seem as good when it's in person and goes through the delivery routes and stuff, and it's like in those little boxes. But yeah, been ordering Chick-fil-A. What about you?
I mean, I'm maybe about to out myself as kind of anyway. I ordered like a enchiladas, and it was $13. And then, but then the delivery person did not have change for a 20, not adequate change. I was, so I was going to tip, $3 or whatever. I'm like, do you have $4 for my 20? So I'll pay 16 over the 13. And no, it turns out they wanted to just give me they wanted me to pay 18 for the 13. And I'm like, well, this tip is starting to get a little too much here. So anyway. So
you got to do it in the app, man. You're slacking. You just got to put your credit card in the app.
Yeah, so I've done that too. I've got the Grubhub and stuff. Sometimes I do that. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Corey. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. Hey, like and share and subscribe and all that stuff, everybody. And try the Choice Media smartphone app. Someday we have to do a show about that. It's going to be on your phone. You can watch videos and hear podcasts, not just ours, and see all kinds of news. So just search Choice Media on your Google Play or your Apple App Store for the low price of free.
All right. Until next week. See you guys.